Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Virtual Philosophy Society. This week, we're incredibly excited to host Professor Jonathan Wolff from Oxford for this week's event. Professor Wolff is the Alfred Landecker Professor of Values and Public Policy at Oxford, as well as the governing body fellow at Wolfson College in Oxford. He has a longstanding interest in health and health promotion, including questions of justice in the healthcare resource allocation, the social determinants of health, and incentives and health behavior. He has been a member of the Nuffield Council of Bioethics, the Academy of Medical Science, working partly on drug futures, the gambling review body, the Homicide Review Group, an external member of the Board of Science of the British Medical Association, and a trustee of GambleAware. Professor Wolff is really quite the accomplished philosopher, and we're very honored to have him here. And without further ado, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So, changed circumstances from the original talk. I can't remember if it was today or another day I was meant to be up there with you, and I think I was going to have dinner first. So, actually, I don't know, something has just changed on my screen, excuse me. Go back to gallery view so I can see you all. All right, so I was going to give a different paper to this one, a different talk. But suddenly work I did maybe 10 years ago has become very relevant. Things around the value of life, value of health, allocation of health resources. And so I thought I would talk through some of the issues that have been discussed quite a lot on the media and social media that would lead up to questions about how we should resource hospitals and what we should do with the resources that we've got when they're scarce. And so, the question in everyone's mind at the moment is, how do we allocate scarce resources, particularly ventilators, if more than one person needs the same resource at the same time? They can't both have it. What criteria should we use for allowing the ventilator to be used by one person rather than another? In the worst cases, are there examples where a person who's on a ventilator should be taken off and would be likely to die, so that same resource can be given to someone else? So that must be the hardest decision anyone has to make, probably in healthcare, to removing a potentially life-saving resource from one person and giving it to others. Anyway, what I'm going to do is begin by talking about the work I started doing, which isn't about health at all, but is about, oddly enough, railway safety. And then I'll move on to health after a little bit after establishing the things about railways. So this may be hard to believe, but I was for a little while employed as a moral consultant to the railway industry in the UK. When I first started talking about this, everyone knew why this was. I think probably not many of you will know about these things. But there were a number of rail crashes in the UK around about 2003, 2004, 2005 that caused a lot of concern. So there was a rail crash at Hatfield, where a train came off the tracks. There was one at Potter's Bar, where the train actually jumped on the tracks. It came apart and the train actually ended up on the platform. It jumped up and ended up on the platform. Amazing thing. In Great Heck or Sulby, the train hit a runaway trailer and there was a head-on collision. So in the space of about 3 or 4 years, there were a number of different high-profile train accidents in the UK. And in all of them, people died. The largest one was Ladbroke Grove, where about 20 or 30 people died. And this had the misfortune of taking place just outside the BBC's premises. So you can imagine a train crashed just by the BBC head office. And so they were out there with the cameras straight away. They were photographing people walking off the trains at first sight. The estimate were hundreds of people had died. By the time it was dealt with, it turned out it was around about 30, which was big enough. And the then Home Secretary was John Prescott, and he immediately went on television saying that you can never spend too much on safety, that the trains were in a dangerous condition and that money had to be spent to make them safe, and there would be no limit to how much you should spend on safety, that a life is priceless and we should spend whatever it takes to save a life. Okay, so that sounds maybe correct, because maybe, how can you put a price on life? How can you put any price on a person's life? Surely if we know how to save someone's life and all it's going to do is cost money, we should do that. So that was the argument that Prescott made, and a lot of people thought he was right about that, because who's going to come up after a train accident and say, excuse me, Home Secretary, you're wrong about this. We do have to put a price on life, and it's this. And therefore, if it costs more than that, we're not going to save the lives. Okay, so imagine that. Imagine you agree with John Prescott and you think it's immoral to put a price on life, that you should never put a price on life. So what would that mean for something like transport policy? So in the UK at the moment, on the road, it's amazing, when I first was giving these talks 15 years ago, 3,500 people a year were dying on the roads in the UK. Now it's down to 2,500 a year. So we've made incredible improvements. We never talk about that. No one knows about it. But the roads are much safer now than they were even 15 years ago. So 2,500 people die on the roads every year. That's a lot of people. We could save those lives, or most of them, by banning cars or lorries. Okay, so that's easy. We know how to save 2,500 lives. We ban cars and lorries. Are we going to do that? Of course not. Why not? Because we think that's too high a price to pay for saving lives. It's not maybe a financial price, but it's a cost. Now, going back to the railways, when the industry invited me to get involved in their discussions about these things, there'd been a number of these accidents, and some of them had been caused by trains going through red lights. And this was really shocking, that you could be a train driver and you could actually drive your train through a red light. That in some countries, they've set up a system called automatic train protection, where the signals are linked to the trains in some way. So it's impossible for the train to go through a red light if the system works. So the red light actually stops the train. In the UK, we don't have that system, and it's down to the driver's discretion. So it's like being a driver of a car. You see a red light and you decide whether to stop or not. I mean, there are lots of safeguards. So lots of overrides. There are whistles that go off, there are alarms that go off, but it's still theoretically possible for a driver to drive through a red light at full speed. And if they do that, they're quite likely to hit another train. So there were a small number of deaths in the UK each year on the trains, maybe 10, maybe 5 of them were caused on average by drivers driving through red light. And the technology existed. It was used in Germany and France to stop that happening. So we could have fitted the railway system with a new system called Automatic Train Protection, ATP, that would have saved all the lives that were being lost by drivers going through red lights. Okay, so that was about 4 lives a year we would have saved if we put in automatic train protection. So how much is that worth? How much should we pay for automatic train protection to save 4 lives a year? Okay, so think about it the other way around. As it turned out, it was going to cost several £billion to bring this in. Even the defenders said it was going to cost something like £6 billion to bring in the technology. And there were other problems with it as well. So should we spend £6 billion to save 4 lives a year for, say, 10 years before the technology needs to be replaced again? Now, the reason I was brought in is that the Observer newspaper was running a campaign against the railway industry, saying that it was immoral for the industry not to bring in this new technology. To spend, it would have been about £100 million for every life saved. Okay, to spend £100 million for every life saved. Now the industry said, this is crazy, because the money to pay for it, because of the way the privatization was done, safety was paid for by the taxpayer. This wasn't private companies who would pay for this, the taxpayer would pay. And if you've got £100 million and you want to save lives, the most stupid way of doing that is by making the railways safer, because hardly anyone is dying on the railways. So saving the next life costs a fortune. Whereas if you think about the NHS, if you think about road safety, if you think about third development policies, aid and development policies, and you want to save lives, you could save hundreds of lives or even thousands of lives with that amount of money. Whereas on the railways, you'd be saving one life. So here's our question, or the first question. How much should you pay? How much is too much to save a life? Because if you could save a life for £5, obviously you would do that. But if it was 5 million, is that too much? If we could make some road improvements and we know that there will be one fewer person dying. So you probably, where you live, there's probably a dangerous road, probably some people die. Maybe we could save someone every year by building a tunnel or something, building a bridge, burying the road underground. We could save a life. How much should we spend to do that? Bearing in mind that the money isn't coming from nowhere, it's money that could be used for other purposes. Okay, so this is the work I was involved with in trying to work out how much we should spend, and are there times when we should spend more. So maybe we'll come back to that later on to see how you feel about this, but the way that the industry deals with this is to say it's actually quite a misleading question to say how much would you spend to save a life. Because before, imagine we do put something like a new signaling system in. We know we think it's going to save lives because we know how many people were dying before. And so if we introduce a new system, fewer people are going to die. But we don't know that for sure. We don't know for certain we're going to save lives. Maybe no one would have died. So really what we're doing is saving what we could call a statistical life. We're making it more likely that fewer people will die. And another way of thinking about that is that what we're doing is paying to make the world safer, a little bit safer for everyone. So if we put a new signaling system in the railways, then every time you get on a train, you're a little bit safer than you were before, tiny, tiny bit safer than you were before. You're slightly less likely to die in the train than you were before because of the signaling system. And when you think about it like that, you can think of a safety improvement as just an ordinary commercial transaction, because this is something we do all the time. You buy smoke alarms, you upgrade tires on your car, maybe there are other things, you buy a better bicycle helmet. All the time, interestingly, we're making trade-offs between money and safety. So sometimes we think, that helmet isn't worth it. Okay, it's a little bit safer, but really you're going to spend £500 on a bicycle helmet just to be a little bit safer. I think, no, that's too much. If it was one that was a lot safer and only cost you an extra £1, then you'd probably buy it. So all the time in our lives, we're making trade-off between safety and money. So the economists say what we're doing is putting a price on life. We don't think of it like that, but that's what we're doing. And so they say that if you run these, you have some models and you can work out what trade-offs people will make. You can ask some questions about how much they'd pay for a bit more safety. Then from that, you've got a formula that you can use to work out how much a life is worth. So anyone know how much a life is worth in the UK at the moment? I don't know how I get you to, you can raise your hand if you know how much a life is worth in the UK at the moment. Any ideas? Any guesses? How much would we put on the value?
My guess is £27,000.
£27,000. Any higher, any lower? Anyone else brave enough to guess?
200,000.
So 27,000, 200,000. How are we doing?
£100.
£100 for a price of life. No, it's okay. The answer is in the UK at the moment is about 1.8 million. So if you're a factory owner and you can save a life, a statistical life, for less than 1.8 million, you have a statutory duty to do it, okay? Or if you're making road improvements, that's how much you have to spend. In the US, it's now about $8 million. So the price of life is much more expensive in the US than it is in the UK. And it tracks the wealth of a country. So the poorer the country, the lower, but not in a linear way. So when I last looked at this a few years ago in the Czech Republic, which is not a lot less affluent than the UK, okay, it's quite substantially less affluent. But at that time, the price in the UK was 1.5 million, and in the Czech Republic, it was 200,000. So there's a big difference between different countries depending on how wealthy they are. So we do put a price on life. I mean, it's amazing we do this. When I read this work, I was staggered to think that in this country, economists and engineers are working out whether to bring in a safety improvement to the roads or the railways based on this very simple cost-benefit analysis. That if it costs less than 1.8 million to bring in and you will save a life, you should do it. If it's going to cost more than that, you shouldn't. And so the safety system, if you remember, I said that was going to cost 99 million pounds a life. Well, they had no obligation to do that. It was only 1.8 million. And so the industry thought that they needed a moral philosopher to come along and defend their position. So they brought me in to try to explain why they shouldn't pay more than that. But it was really tricky. It's a really tricky area because, see what you think about this. When I explain to you this type of cost-benefit analysis, you might be thinking, if I've done it right, you might be thinking, well, it's mad to spend so much money on railway safety. So few people are dying. It's incredibly expensive. With that money, we could do so much other good. It's absolutely mad. So from a consequentialist point of view, it's much better to spend the money somewhere else. Okay, so I could go to a meeting with railway executives, we'll have that discussion, we'll go home, and we'll think absolutely everything's fine. That's the right answer. In those days, it's still not almost true, not quite. Every middle-class person would wake up to Radio 4 in the morning, and there would often be stories about railway safety. And these are very appealing stories for the listenership for Radio 4. And so quite often they'd have someone who had been in a railway accident or who'd lost someone in a railway accident on TV. And, on the radio. And one such person was a novelist, Nina Borden, who was in one of these railway accidents, and her husband died. And so she was quite a well-known person, very articulate. Her husband, who was actually, I think, a radio producer, had died in one of these accidents. So she was on radio quite a lot. And you would hear her or other people like her, it wasn't just her, saying, look, this is the 21st century. We've got trains that are going through red lights. The technology exists to stop that. It's the 21st century. We're relying on Victorian technology to save lives. This is crazy. It's just money. All we need to do is spend some money and we'll stop these people dying. It's immoral. It's undefensible. One person, if we can save one person and it's just money, we should spend it. So I didn't do that very well, but you can imagine, you listen to that on the radio and you think, you know what, she's right. It's only money. Let's not do this consequentialist cost-benefit analysis. We've got the money. We do have the money. We could do it. We can save those lives. So let's just save those lives. And then you go to the office to talk to the radio executives. They heard the same program. They're all thinking the same thing. Maybe we should just do it, even though it's going to cost so much. And I think, but it's taxpayers' money. It's not our money. And if we're going to spend so much money, taxpayers' money, it should be something that's much better. We should, if we want to save lives, let's save lives on the railways or put the money in the NHS. It's mad to put this money into the railway system where it will save so few lives. Okay, so what's so interesting to me from a philosophical point of view is that there's a consequentialist argument that says that if you've got a budget for saving lives, spend it so you save as many as you can. So if that means we don't spend any more on railway safety and we spend it on road safety or the NHS, that's what we should do. So from a consequentialist point of view, you want to save as many lives as you can with the money. From a deontological point of view or a Kantian point of view, there are these people dying on the railways. We know how to stop it. Surely they have a duty just to stop people dying if they know how to do it. And so you can switch, I think, from a consequentialist point of view to a deontological point of view, a duty-based point of view. And what's so interesting to me, I don't know if you had the same intuitions, but for me, you know, when we write textbooks, including the textbooks I write myself, there's one chapter on consequentialism and then another chapter on deontology. And you say some people are consequentialists, some people are deontologists. There's this sort of trench warfare going on between the consequentialists and the deontologists. But what I find is that this is a warfare that's going on inside my own head. It's not that I side with the deontologists or I side with the consequentialists. No, I see the power of both of these sides of the argument. On the one hand, surely if we can save a life, we've got a duty to do it. On the other hand, if we can save more lives with the same money, surely we should do that as well. Or instead, rather, we should use the money to save as many lives as possible. So anyway, later on I'll come back and I'll be interested to see what you think about that. But let me now move over to the related area of health resources. So the way the discussion about health resource allocation works in the UK is through what is called NICE, the National Institute. It used to be the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. It keeps changing its name, but it's still NICE. So I'm not quite sure what it is. It might be the National Institute of Care and Social Excellence or National Institute of something else. But what NICE does is, it does many things. One thing it does is issue clinical guidance, which is very useful. So at the moment, NICE is putting out guidance about how ventilators ought to be allocated in hospitals and how you diagnose patients with different conditions. But one other thing NICE does is work out whether the NHS ought to buy drugs or not. So this is the famous role that NICE has. So suppose you are a cancer drug manufacturer, you're a pharmaceutical company, and you've just produced a new drug that you say is effective for liver cancer. So you've spent years developing this, it's gone through all the trials, cost an absolute fortune. You want to bring it to market, and you want the National Health System to use it. So NICE will evaluate whether or not the National Health System will use the drug or not. They call it, the technical term is whether the NHS will refund. I don't know why they say refund instead of pay. Anyway, this is what they do. Will the NHS refund the price of the drugs? So here's your liver cancer drug. Suppose it extends someone's life if they've got liver cancer. That's good. Liver cancer is horrible. Life is normally worth having. If you can extend someone's life for a few months, surely that's worth it. And so imagine there's a drug, it extends someone's life for just 3 months on average. So you can see how this would work. For some people, it's not effective at all. Maybe for some people, it gives them a year or two. Other people, it gives them a month or two. But on average, it gives people 3 months. Okay, that's not fantastic, but it's not nothing. Should the NHS buy that drug and give it to every patient with liver cancer? Well, we do a similar thing. Suppose it costs £1 million for the patient to extend their life on average for 3 months. Should the NHS pay for that? Well, the NHS has got a limited budget. It can do lots of other things for £1 million. It can give maybe 1,000 hip operations. So should we do 1,000 hip operations? And maybe that's too many, and maybe it's only 200, but should we do 200 hip operations or extend someone's life for 3 months? How do you make that decision? Now, what NICE does is use a concept called the Quality Adjusted Life Year, the Quali. Have you heard of the Quali? Put your hand up if you've heard of the Quali. Okay, some of you have heard of it, not all of it. Have you? Okay, so the Quali was first discussed in the 1970s. I remember this when I was a child, and my mother listening to this on the radio and being completely outraged that we were going to be putting a price on life, because this is what we're talking about now, again, putting a price on life. Because what NICE does is to say 1 year in full health has a value of 1 quali. Okay, so if you're in full health for a year, that gives you a value of 1 quali. 2 years in full health is 2 qualis. But quite often people live in less than full health. So to use an example, they have done some calculations. We can talk later about how you get to these calculations that say being blind is not the same as having full health, they say. Being blind is less than full health. Some blind people will disagree with this, but NICE has said, I think, that being blind gives you a quali of only 0.5 qualis. So 1 year of being alive, being blind, let's say, is a value of 0.5 qualis. Or if you're diabetic, maybe that's 0.8. If you're blind and diabetic, maybe that's 0.4, so on. So this seems very troubling, very insulting. But what they say is that we need these types of measures in order to work out which drugs we should pay for and which we shouldn't. Because any drug is going to give an improvement either to length of life or to quality of life, or both. Length of life or quality of health, rather, or both. So the question is, how do we decide where to put our budget when we have more than one claim on it? So one drug extends your life, say, another improves the quality of your life. So a drug that cured blindness or stopped someone becoming blind would give them 0.5 quali for every year of improvement. Do you see that? That if you live a life, suppose if you're blind, your years of life only have 0.5 qualis. If you're cured and you get full sight back, maybe you'll go up to 1.0 qualis in the remaining years. So for every year you live, that's half a quali that you've got. So how much should we pay for that medication? How much should the NHS pay for a medication to cure someone of blindness? And maybe an average person, suppose middle years, has another 30 to 40 years to live. Take someone who's 40 years old, they've got another 40 years to live. So if this pill cures you for blindness and you go from someone who's blind age 40 to not blind and you'll live on average another 40 years, how much should we pay for it? It gives you how many years? 20 qualis for that pill. That's a lot because it's curing someone's blindness. So anyway, what we have done in NICE is to say that, roughly speaking, if you can get a quali, if a drug gives you a quali for between 20 and 30,000 pounds, so someone mentioned the figure of 27,000 earlier, that's probably a figure for a quali for 1 year of life rather than the whole year of life. If we can give you 1 year of life for 25,000 pounds, if the medication costs 25,000 pounds, then that's what we will do. So the NHS will be prepared to pay that per quali. That's quite a lot of money. Now, a lot of cancer drugs are very much more expensive than £25,000 a year, maybe £75,000 a year. So there's no way that a cancer drug could be, that's cost £75,000 a year, there's no way that could be refunded by the NHS, because the best a drug can do is take you from no quali per year to 1 quali a year, which would be £30,000. So the most expensive drug that the NHS would refund would be £30,000. And bearing in mind, it's unlikely to bring you to a full state of health, somewhat less. Okay, so this is pretty horrible, that people have to do these calculations. Health economists measure your health state, they measure your health state improvement, and they match it against the cost of drugs to see who should get, which diseases should be treated. Okay, now it's very important that this is not a principle for allocating care to particular individuals. This is a principle for deciding which drugs are available on the NHS. It's not a principle for deciding who gets those drugs, because it's assumed that if they're on the NHS, everyone who has a condition will get them, because we worked out what average benefit they do. But suppose we use the same principle for allocating care to individuals. And we said that we're consequentialists now, and what we want to do is get the maximum benefit out of our health budget. So we've got a health budget, and we've got some pharmaceuticals, and we're going to start giving these pharmaceuticals to particular individuals. And what we want to do is to maximize qualies in the world. Okay, so from a consequentialist point of view, this may seem the right thing to do. If you've got a budget, surely, and you're a health service, you want to get as much health as you can out of your budget. Surely that's what a health service should be doing, getting health out of its budget. But think about it for a bit. What does this mean? Okay, so imagine we've got two people. They both have the same condition. They both need a heart transplant. One of them will be very close to perfect health if they have the heart transplant, let's say. So this person, they're both quite young, their bodies will respond quite well. And so if they get the heart transplant, they'll be restored to perfect health. The other person is exactly the same age, will live just as long, but is unfortunately blind. So if you're using qualies to allocate healthcare resources, who's going to get the heart? What do? Give it to the person in full health? Give it to the person who's blind? Toss a coin? How do we maximize qualies? Yeah. Any offers?
Person in full health.
So who said that? Okay.
Tom.
That's Tom. Thank you, Tom. I can't see you, I don't think, but anyway. So can you explain why, Tom?
Because for every year that the full health person would have that heart, they would gain 1 quali, but for every year that the blind person would have that heart, they would gain half a quali.
Exactly right. So this is very troubling, because if you look for health maximization, then you allocate the health resources to people who are most likely to return to full health, and you get more qualies from them. So maximizing qualies has this problem called discriminating against people with disabilities. So if you've got an unrelated disability that already means you're not in full health, then you're at a disadvantage when the allocation of these scarce resources comes up. Okay, so maybe you can see why I've gone this long way round talking about qualies to now talk about the situation in front of us, which is the allocation of ventilators in hospitals for COVID-19 in the ICU unit. So Italy, I think, had this problem first. I don't know if you probably all read about this. Doctors at the bedside were having to decide who got the ventilators. When the ventilators, there weren't enough ventilators in the hospitals, suddenly there was a rush of demand. So, does anyone remember what Italy did first off, or what they were said to have done? No? Okay, well, the first thing they did, supposedly, was to have an age cutoff. And so they said that if you were over 65, you did not get the ventilator. Okay. Then a bit later, it came down to 60, which is very alarming for me because I've just turned 60. And so this means that I would not have got the ventilator if I was in Italy, even though there's nothing else that is any health problem of mine, as far as I know. Okay, so there was this suggestion then that first of all, there should just be distribution on the basis of age. And there is a type of quali justification for this, that the younger you are, the more years of life you will have. So the younger you are, the more you should have priority, because we're going to get more qualies out of you if we keep you alive, other things being equal. And there's another argument that used to go around. It was in the textbooks, it's still being discussed, known as the fair innings argument. So the fair innings argument is a funny name because it's named after something that happens in playground cricket. Whereas if someone's been in bat too long, even if they're not out, you say, hand the bat to someone else, you've had a fair innings. You've had a good go. You've taken more than your turn. So the idea of the fair innings argument is that there comes a point in your life where you say, look, you've had a good life. You've had enough years out of your life. So the resources should go to a younger person. You've had a good chance at life. If you're already 80, you've had a fair innings in life, but there's these other people, maybe they're only 30. Surely the people who are 30 or people in their 20s, that might mean something to some of you, or even younger than that. Those people should get priority because they haven't had a fair innings at life yet. They haven't had a fair chance at life yet. So two very similar arguments. One says we get more qualies. So from a utilitarian or maximizing point of view, we get more qualies if we give the resources to the young. Then from a fairness point of view, older people have already had a fair crack at life, and so we should give the resources to the young people. So those are principles that are being used. What do we think about those? Well, we'll talk about that in discussion. What is happening now is that we've moved from thinking about pure age discrimination to comorbidities. So what is comorbidities? Comorbidities are other illnesses you may have. So if now we're talking about, say, two patients the same age, one has underlying good health, the other has diabetes and a heart condition and a lung problem. Which one is going to get the ventilator? I think most people would say the person in good health should get the ventilator rather than the person with the comorbidities, the other underlying diseases. But there are two different reasons for that. One is the Quali argument. So the Quali argument says if they both survive, we get more qualies out of the person in good health than the person who's got comorbidities. The other is the one that seems more respectable, is that it's simply that the person with good health has more chance of surviving. That the person who has comorbidities, if you've already got a lung problem, serious lung problem, you're quite unlikely to survive anyway. So your chances of survival are low. So in the technical literature, this is sometimes called the futility argument. We shouldn't give people futile treatments, i.e. treatments that won't work or that have a very low possibility of working. So at the moment, the main idea seems to be that we should give people priority if they're in better health, better general health. Why? Because they have a greater chance of surviving. Okay, is that good? Anything you can object to in that? Well, people who are in poor health don't like it very much. They think they're being treated unfairly. Now, why should their life be treated as less important just because they have less chance of survival? But there's another problem that may have occurred to you, which is in taking society as a whole and thinking in terms of social and economic status, who are the people who get to an older age in good health, and who are the people who get to an older age in poor health? Well, there's something known as the social gradient in health, which is roughly speaking, the richer you are, the longer you live and the better health you're in. So pensioners who are from the upper middle classes, they're in their 60s, they're going around the world on cruises, they're still playing golf, they're still riding their horses, they're in good physical condition. There are people from lower economic status, they might have had a dangerous job, they might have been poorly nourished when they were younger, they might have had other health conditions. So people from lower economic status are more likely to have comorbidities and therefore less likely to get the ventilator if you do it on the basis of comorbidities. So this is the practical dilemma that people are actually facing in hospitals. That do you go purely on the basis of likelihood to benefit? You give the ventilator to the patient who's likely to get the best results? Or do you try to compensate for the fact that people may have had a very tough life, and this is another way of making the world even more unfair to them if they've had a tough life in the past? Now, I think the philosophical consensus is that we should have some principle of adjustment or compensation. I think the medical consensus is that we can't go there. We can't make these judgments at the bedside. we're doctors, we're not social workers, we're not social scientists. All we've got are the clinical signs in front of us. Those are the things we can judge. And so don't make us judge things like, did this patient have a tough upbringing? Did this patient suffer domestic violence? Can a doctor really be making a judgment on those bases? So you can see there, there's a whole set of questions we can answer, and I think I'll just stop with this. So one question is, what principles should we be applying? Another question is, who should be applying those principles? Who should be making the decisions? Is it fair to be asking doctors who are exhausted, they probably had a long shift, no sleep, is it fair to ask the doctors to decide who gets a ventilator? Or should it be someone else making those decisions? And if it is the doctors, should they be allowed to make decisions on a more narrow criteria than we might think is fair? Okay, so let me stop there and let's see if anyone has any comments or questions they might like to make. Spencer, are you going to moderate, or how do we do this? Oh, Spencer's gone, okay. So put up your hand if you would like to ask a question. Okay, I've seen Kyle's hand. I think there are virtual hands as well, but Kyle, let's go with you first and we'll see how we go from there.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for your talk. I think Spencer's trying to reconnect. I'm surprised he hasn't jumped on here again. I'm sure he will in a bit. I was just gonna say, the thing that seemed wrong to me with the sort of like argument when you're talking about comorbidities is that you're kind of, when you privilege a person with better health, you're doing it for reasons that, well, sort of there are factors that are beyond their control, I think, to a large extent, right? So that's the thing that seems philosophically wrong to me, is that the person in good health is usually not in good health because of factors of control. The person who's in bad health is usually not in bad health because of factors within their control. So that's the thing that seems kind of wrong to me, and that's I think the basis for which you ought to compensate, because of this sort of like control principle. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I mean, so this is such a tricky territory. It's such a tricky territory in health. So if we take another example that was much discussed, no one is discussing it today because they've got other things to worry about. But every now and again, people think about obesity and hip replacements or joint replacements, or smokers and lung cancer. So these are groups of people who have engaged in a type of behavior, knowing that it can lead to health problems. I mean, anyone who smokes now knows they've got a very high chance of lung cancer. So it's not as if it's a decision made in ignorance. And so if we thought that if you take a voluntary decision that leads to a health problem, then fine, that's your choice, but you shouldn't expect the taxpayer to bail you out. Then we've got some tricky questions here. So do we stop giving? So, okay, if you're 90 years old or 80 years old, maybe you started smoking, got addicted before we knew about lung cancer. But anyone of my age or younger, or even my parents' age actually, and younger, anyone in their 80s or 70s knows that smoking was likely to lead to lung cancer. Okay, so on that principle that if it was under your control, you don't get help from the state, we close down the lung cancer wards, apart from to non-smokers, say. Okay, so how happy are we with that? The lung cancer is one example. Obesity is another. People say this is a lifestyle choice. So if you damage your hips and your knees because you're overweight, then okay, you can have an operation, but you have to pay for it yourself, not the NHS. So this is tough. This is tough because it raises lots of questions. One is whether these really were free choices. I mean, how much free will do we really have? Maybe with smoking, you could have made that decision, but some people have different mechanisms in the brain to others. For some people, it's easy to give up. Other people, you have a few cigarettes when you're young, you're addicted, it's almost impossible. Obesity, do we really know about the causes of obesity? So on. So yeah, it's quite interesting. A few years ago, this was discussed in relation to the footballer George Best. So probably not everyone here knows who George Best is that George Best was the most glamorous footballer that has probably ever played. He was from Northern Ireland. He played for Manchester United. He was incredibly skillful, very handsome, very attractive to women. He had enormous numbers of girlfriends. He drank and smoked as well. And his career was over, I think, in his 20s because he just didn't take care of his body. And he became an alcoholic. And he had a liver transplant. He was given a liver transplant. And he carried on drinking, even though he promised he would stop. He carried on drinking. And he ruined his liver. And so there was a question, should he be given another liver transplant? So this was really interesting because on the one hand, people said, well, he shouldn't because he's drinking and he's brought the damage on himself. So it's only him to blame. On the other hand, people thought, he's George Best. He's a national icon. He's one of our heroes. He should get another liver. And so that debate went on for a little bit. But what sealed it in the end was the idea, not the backward-looking argument that he had ruined the last liver, but the forward-looking argument, which is he wouldn't take care of the next one. So these are very different arguments. So the backward-looking argument is about what you've done in the past and is about blame and control. The forward-looking argument is about sort of stewardship of precious resources. So if we knew George Best would look after the liver, then we've got something to talk about. But we know he's going to ruin it, so let's give it to someone who's going to take care of it. So that's really what the comorbidity argument is doing. Of course, in the George Best case, it's about behaviour, and the comorbidity, once you've got the comorbidities, once you've got lung problems. But you're right, there is this control principle and blame principle that would say that if it is your own choice, you're not responsible for it. I'll say last thing on this before I take the next question. I used to do some work with a man called Donald Franklin, who's a philosopher, who's also a civil servant, a very high up civil servant in the Department of Health. And he doesn't remember saying this to me, but I remember him saying that in the national health system, we believe in the right of redemption. So what is the right of redemption? Well, basically, however much you've sinned in the past, you should have another chance now. We're not going to condemn you for your past behavior. We think that everyone has a chance, should be given a chance of full health, even if you've behaved badly in the past. So I like this. It's like this Christian idea of the right of redemption in the health service. I mean, the problem is, of course, when the resources are very scarce. So if we're talking about who should get so Kyle, that argument that you made is stronger if you've got one liver and two people. And you're trying to work out who to give it to. If you've got as many livers as you need, they just cost a lot of money. Then the control argument doesn't look so strong. Okay, is there another question on the chat?
Yeah, Tom has a question.
Okay, hello.
Hey, Tom.
So the discussion that you're outlining there made me think of a book I read, a fantasy book I read when I was a kid, in which the characters had a battle and they had a very scarce amount of poppy-derived opiate, basically, to use as a painkiller. And the decision the characters made in this book was to only give the opioid to the patients that they felt were likely to survive. Now, right. I wondered what you think about that decision. Is that the correct one? Whether it would be morally better to give the painkiller to the patients likely to survive or those who are destined to die?
Okay, that's very interesting, isn't it? So, and presumably the painkiller doesn't have anything to do with the chances of survival.
No, none whatsoever.
Okay. So that's a different type of question because what I was thinking of was triage, which you have in battlefield medicine and in the accident emergency clinic. So if you turn up at the A&E, the first person you see will put you into one of three categories. So one category is, it's trivial, just go away, don't bother us. Another is it's serious, you need absolutely immediate attention or you're going to die. So they have priority. And then there's a third category of people who can wait. It's not urgent and they can wait. And to some degree, doctors always will have to use principles like that. But I see, but what you're saying is there are some people who are going to die, some people who are going to survive. We should give the painkiller to one group. But
And you can assume in either case that the suffering they will endure is roughly the same length of time.
Yeah.
For simplicity.
Yeah. Okay. So the obvious answer is the opposite to the one you said, isn't it? In that if you're going to die, then you should be given the painkiller, because the people who are going to survive will have the benefits of surviving. So as a type of compensation to the people who are going to die, that they should be given the painkiller. The alternative, now, assuming that the painkiller doesn't make any further effect other than this equivalent one. So what is the argument for giving it to people who will survive? So the only argument I can think of is that the memory of pain is also very bad. So if you're giving it to people who are going to die, you're not saving them from the memory of pain because they're going to die. Whereas if you give it to the people who are going to survive, you're saving them from the traumatic memory. So you're giving them two goods instead of one good. But Tom, did it say in this book or novel why those who were going to survive got it?
Sadly, I don't think the author explored that topic any further. What a shame.
You should write back to them and say, no, you got that wrong, actually. I've studied some philosophy now, and I know that you got the wrong answer.
I'll add that to my to-do list.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, thanks. Is there another question?
So I have a question, if it's okay.
Is that Spencer? Yeah.
Yeah. So suppose, that I am a deontologist, and suppose that I kind of leave the discussion of the practicalities of sort of the NHS decisions feeling like it's too consequentialist, it's too, sort of upsetting. How would someone who has deontological sympathies go about kind of providing an alternative model for decision making? Because on one level, you do have to, if you're talking about money in some sense, how much should you spend? You have to talk about financial quantities. So how would, I guess, a deontologist try to make these decisions in a way that kind of fits with their view quite well?
Yeah. So this is so interesting. I was reading the evidence given to a select committee of the House of Parliament maybe 20, 30 years ago when all of this was being discussed. And the health economists came along and they explained the Quali principles, and the MPs and the Lords were saying, yeah, okay, we don't like this, we don't like the sound of this very much, but it's sensible, it gives you a decision procedure. What else are you going to do? And then there was a philosopher, quite a well-known medical ethicist called John Harris, who was at Manchester, who was also giving evidence. And he gave some quite good arguments against Qualis, like the discrimination against disability, discrimination against older people, and pointed out all the things we know, some of the things we've discussed today, some other things. And you can see from the minutes that the MPs and the Lords found this quite a compelling criticism, and that they were ready to be convinced. And so they asked John, so what should we do instead then? And John said, look, I'm a philosopher. It's for me to point out what's wrong with something. It's not for me to come up with an alternative. And that was the last question they asked him. They went back to the economists because they needed an answer. They didn't need objections to something else. They needed how to do something. And so for a lot of my work in this area, I've been trying to think, well, what do we do instead? Okay. It's all very well making these criticisms. The economists know the criticisms. Everyone knows the criticisms. What do you do instead? So, and this has come up as a debate, even on Twitter in the last 2 weeks, I've been having this debate with people because people have been criticizing the way the ventilators have been allocated. So I've been saying, what do you do instead? And one thing that has come up is to just raise a question. Don't talk in terms of comorbidity. Don't talk in terms of other conditions. Just talk in terms of how beneficial this treatment is going to be to this patient in these circumstances. So go back to the patient, go back to the case where you've got the blind person and the person in full health. there's an argument that says we should ignore quali considerations then, because both of them can be restored to their previous condition. And so that's what matters. Being able to restore people to their previous condition is what matters. Now, you might worry about how long for, because if it's 1 second, that's no good. So you might put on cutoff points. You might start talking about the length of time. But to restore people to previous conditions, it is one way. There are problems with that. You know, if you give philosophers a principle, eventually they'll point out what's wrong with it. So when people were discussing this, they said, well, okay, there is discrimination here. Because imagine you've got 2 people. Okay, this is a crazy example, but anyway, you've got 2 people. One of them is in full health, the other is blind. If there's a treatment that makes you blind, okay? Now, if you give it to the blind person, they'll make a full recovery because they're already blind, but the person in full health will end up blind, so they won't make a full recovery. So under this principle, you would definitely give the treatment to the blind person because they can make a full recovery. Whereas the other person won't make a full recovery, they'll end up blind, which is the same condition as the other person. So that seems very strange that it should be so clear you give it to the blind person. Okay, that's never going to happen. Okay, but it does show that even this principle, which is quite humane. So people say years of life matter. A minimum condition of life matters, but we shouldn't be measuring people's quality of life unless it affects their length of life. Because the comorbidity argument is really about length of life. It's not about quality of life. It's saying that if you've got lung problems, if you've got heart problems, you're not going to survive for so long afterwards. You might not survive at all, whereas a person without the comorbidities will survive. So I think it's really tough. I think, you know, if philosophy had a Nobel Prize, the person who can come up with a decent deontological theory of health resource allocation will win the Nobel Prize, will win the philosophy Nobel Prize, because that's the, you know, the holy grail here. We know how to do it in consequentialist terms. We know the problems. So people like me have gone around for the last, God knows, well, people before me from the 70s, trying to adjust the cost-benefit analysis to change the variables so it comes out a bit more fair. So you see the problem cases and you try to tweak it so you get rid of the problem cases. But unless you're just tossing a coin in every case, we don't have an alternative system that doesn't do some form of calculation. Okay, so do we have another question anywhere?
Yeah, Louisa had a question. Do you still have the question, Louisa? Or
where's Louisa?
It's all right. I'll go with just following the order. Kimon.
Actually, I'm writing down my question right now. And it's a little bit all over the place.
So you want to come back? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can come back to you. Arvo.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for your talk. So you talked about distinguishing between A, the moral tension in the classroom when reading a philosophy textbook, and B, at a personal level, maybe professional, when we're confronted with 2 arguments and we're trying to be charitable to both sides. And you gave the example of listening to the radio 4 arguments. When we're living in a time like this where delaying a decision costs lives, how should we proceed? Just for practical purposes, should we conduct a survey of health economists, as you said, maybe, and moral philosophers, and follow the outcome of their vote? And moreover, maybe if you could talk more about this kind of distinction you made, and how if we're truly convinced by, say, the consequentialist arguments, and we're forced to make a difficult decision, why should we pay any attention to our intuitions at that point?
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. So one thing that struck me, and this concerns end of life decisions in my own family, is that however much philosophy you've read, you're not ready to make. You're not well equipped to make these decisions because they're so fast. They come at you so fast, and if you don't have a second chance at it, You have that one decision. You can't talk to your friends, you can't write an essay, you can't see what other students have done. You have to make a decision there and then. Should we authorize the ventilator? Should we do a DNR? Should we do something? And really, you don't have a lot to go on other than sort of compassion and gut feelings and belief in what the patient may have wanted in those cases. So being in the hospital and being in the seminar room are completely different experiences, and the seminar room doesn't equip you for the hospital. Having said that, it will help you think about some of the issues. It might make you less emotional about some of the things. But so I'm trying to get to the heart of your question, Arvo. Do you want to say again what you thought the main point was that you were coming up with?
Yes. I guess, sorry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, how do you go from the seminar room to the hospital?
Right.
And I guess you've already mentioned one of the things that can be helpful, and is being less emotional and being able to think a bit more clearly.
Yeah.
I was just interested to hear more about where you, and then really perhaps something that involved a bit of epistemic humility and involving others to decide as a group together what we're going to be doing.
Okay, great. So so the first thing we do, okay, there you are in the room. There's only one ventilator. You've got 2 patients. You have to make a decision. Some cases it's obvious. Some cases it's really hard. Some cases you toss a coin. Some cases you make a decision and then think you made the wrong one afterwards. But the other question is, why have we only got 1 ventilator? And who made that decision? We're only going to have 1 ventilator. Can't we get another ventilator? So the one thing that is really interesting, where you get a difference between health economists and other people, is health economists are used to making assumptions. So they assume we've got 1 ventilator. Who's going to get it? Whereas the people who work more in the human rights area say, look, everyone's got a right to health. So if someone dies when we could have saved them, we're violating their right to health. So why don't we have more resources here? And so the economists will say, no, we've assumed the parameter, there's only 1 resource. And the human rights people say, well, stop assuming. Let's see if we can get another ventilator or another hospital. So in other words, quite often, the practical way of solving a problem, a dilemma, is to argue up. I've called it in other cases sort of arguing up the food chain. You go back up the food chain. Why are these the parameters? Why are we in this situation? Why do we have this dilemma? What can we do to get out of the dilemma? Now, maybe we can't get out of the dilemma today, but do we really want to continue having that same dilemma tomorrow and next week and the week after and the week after that? So there comes a point where you say, actually, we should just be spending more money here. Maybe we've got the calculations wrong. Maybe we have to do some emergency things. And you see, this is what every government around the world is doing at the moment. So no government is saying, look, it's fact of life. We've only got 20 ventilators. That's how things are. We made that decision. We had we had our resource allocation budget meeting last year, and that's a decision we made, and we've got to stick with it. So now we've just got to work out who goes on the ventilator. They're all saying, where can we get another 50 ventilators from? Where can we get another 100 ventilators from? So they're trying to, so this is the right thing to do. You try to mitigate the dilemma. It's very unphilosophical in a way. It's very unacademic, because you're denying the assumptions of the problem. And this is irritating for philosophers, because you set up this exquisite puzzle and you want to get people's intuitions out. And you say, well, why do we have to be in that puzzle? This is one of the things that annoys me about things like the trolley problem. There you are with the trolley problem. Then get better trains. Don't have trains that you stop. Get better health and safety. Don't have people on the track who don't have whistles, something, or radio control. So just don't get yourself into these problems. Or if you're in the problem, get out of them. And the other thing to say, and this has been impressed on me by some Kantians, to say, look, we will have tragic cases. There will be people who denied the ventilator, but we don't throw them on the trash heap just because we don't have room for them on the ventilator. We should still give them every bit of human respect we can. So we should give the best palliative care, explain to them why we've made the decision, involve them in the decision, get them to understand the rationale for it, rather than just thinking, okay, we've got the principle, we're going to apply it. That's the end. Okay. So
Riyadh. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Continue. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say next question. That was all. I was usurping your job.
Okay. Yeah. Riyadh, did you have a question?
No, I think it was pretty much answered there. Thank you.
Okay. KP.
Hi, that's me, Camilla.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the talk. Firstly, it's really illuminating in a time like this. I actually had the same question as Arvo had, so that's been answered, because it does seem like a lot of the decisions that are being made now in policy-wise are to avoid having to make those decisions about who gets the ventilators. So I'm going to move on to my other question, which is, should people's future contributions to society be taken into account? So for example, should doctors be given a priority in the emergency room rather than any person off the street?
Yeah, very good question. Okay, so there are two different things that come to mind here. So I'll come back to the doctors in a moment. But early on, I talked about putting the value on a human life. And I said we had a figure of £1.8 million in the UK and I think 8 million in the US, so on. So there's a question, where does that number come from? Is it plucked out of the air? Now, the answer I hinted at, I didn't develop fully, is that what we do now is we look at people's consumer behavior, how much they'd pay to make their life a bit safer. What would they pay for a fire alarm? How much extra do you have to give them to do a dangerous job? So people are constantly doing these trade-offs between risk and money. But before that, if we go back to the 1950s and 60s, people used something they called the human capital approach, which is how much are you going to contribute to society? So you are worth what you're going to contribute to society. Now, this is highly problematic because there's a sense in which most people don't contribute anything at all because you consume as much as you produce. And so they only looked at the production side, not the consumption side. So it was already skewed. But it was even worse than that because there comes a point in your life where you're consuming without producing. So your human capital becomes negative, in which case it follows that the industry should be paid for killing you in that case. That if your human capital is negative, the value of your life is negative. So you can see that has some extremely inhumane consequences. So the human capital approach generally has fallen out of favor. Now, you're not talking about that so much, you're talking about life-saving situations, and we've got this now. So if you've got ventilators and you've got a doctor who needs it, and you've got someone who's the same age, same chances of survival, but isn't a doctor, should it go to the doctor? Now, and suppose there's also someone who makes a contribution to society, big contribution to society, but isn't a doctor. It's not a health contribution. So choose your favorite person. It could be a sports person, opera singer, business person. Although if it was, you probably wouldn't be doing philosophy, but the best philosopher, your favorite philosopher. Okay, there's your favorite philosopher, the doctor, and someone who's neither a doctor or a philosopher. All the same age, all the same condition, there's only one ventilator. Who should get it? So three possible arguments. One is we just toss a coin and allocate it randomly. They're all human beings. No one has more right to life than the other. Another is that we look at what contribution to society we're going to make. And maybe that philosopher is going to solve the deontological health allocation resource problem. It's going to make a huge contribution to society. So maybe it's a philosopher who's got the biggest contribution. Or we could think, how are we going to maximize health benefit? And there, the argument would be, well, we give it to the doctor, because if the doctor survives, the doctor will save more people. And interestingly, that is the argument that people seem to be making. It's not their general, it's not because the doctor makes a general contribution to society. It's because if we save the doctor, that doctor might be able to save more people. And so we have a health benefit argument. There's also the argument, of course, that the doctor most likely has become ill through their own exposure to other people and through their own heroic acts. And so this is a type of reward, a desert-based argument. You see this a lot for nurses, that nurses are are putting their life on the line. They don't have to do the job. If they get ill, it should be the first priority to help them. I'd agree with that argument, except that in some hospitals in Italy, so many health workers were getting ill that only the health workers would have had access to the ventilators. So do we really want a system that only saves the doctors? And so there's the proposal is that the doctors should get a higher priority and the nurses should get a higher priority, but not absolute priority. This remains quite a difficult, unsolved problem, in fact. Okay. So I've got a bit more time if you want to carry on for a bit longer.
I think Kimon, and then I don't think anyone else has their hand up. So
okay, so just take Kimon and then we'll finish. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks again for the talk. I'm going to apologize for having probably a pretty messy question. It's been a super nice day in St Andrews, and I've already had like half a bottle of wine, so it's not going to be the most coherent I've been. But I mean, I was coming into this, I guess, with a fairly utilitarian kind of consequentialist intuition, but I'm also very sympathetic to like inequality and unfairness-based arguments that saying that, well, the purely consequentialist decision-making procedure actually completely ignores all those other factors. But it still seems to me that there is on the grounds of like partiality, if we think that the state or whoever makes those policy decisions, that they should at least be considering different people impartially, there still seems to be a strong ground to think, well, the way that well-being should be allocated should take into account factors like how long people are going to live for and how much they're going to get out of being saved. And so like it seems to me that there might be quite a lot of nuance onto how you spell out exactly what policy you have. Even on grounds of fairness and partiality, there's a lot of pressure into going for some kind of calculus that tries to maximize those things, because it could be anyone who is in that position of needing the ventilators, and it would be kind of I can't find the right words for saying what I want to say exactly, but it's like I could I'll leave it there. And hopefully that made enough sense.
Okay, it made enough sense. Thank you. So let me talk about one real life case which is relevant to this. So there was a hospital in the US, I forget where it was, where they were doing, I believe it was kidney transplants. And there were not enough kidneys. So you have people who've been on the list for a long time before they got it, and some people never got it. And so you have a question, how do you allocate the kidneys? And there was a standard way of doing this. There are something like 16 clinical indicators on how likely the operation will be to be successful. There's a whole list of these indicators. So there's things like blood group, God knows what else. But for doctors, they know that if someone has a high score, a high match on these indicators, it's very likely that the transplant will be successful. If there's a low match, then there's a very high chance the transplant will be unsuccessful. So on utilitarian grounds, it seems just right that you look for clinical matches. So a kidney comes in, you look at the register, who's the best match, you give it to that patient. And that way you maximize kidneys, you get the most life out of the kidneys that you're bringing in. There may be an age adjustment as well, but let's leave that to one side. So that sounds fantastic. They're doing a good job. Who could complain? Then when they looked at the list, it turned out that almost no African Americans were getting transplants. And that was because most of the donors were white, and there is a limited number of clinical indicators that go with ethnicity. And so if you're a white recipient, you're more likely to be a good match for the kidneys than if you're a black recipient in that particular part of the world at that time. So what do? Do you say, oh, well, that's the rub of the green, life's unfair, but this is the best way of allocating? Or do you say, well, this is so unfair because you've got a group that's already discriminated against that are going to be even further discriminated against by this policy? And so they ended up with a compromise. So they said, what we're going to do is a mixture of clinical match and time on the register. So the longer you're on the register, the less strong the clinical match had to be for you to come to the top of the list. And that way, some African-American patients were getting transplants. Quite likely, there was a higher failure rate, but still it seemed fair to allow it. So there you've got a combination of fairness and sort of utilitarian criteria. But of course, in anything like this, you say, well, what's the principle? You know, how are you going to combine the two things? They're so different. What's the way of putting the two together? And of course, there's no non-arbitrary way of doing that. You just have to come up with a decision. You know, what seems fair. So I think Arvo before asked me about intuitions and can we rely on intuitions? And the answer is no, we can't rely on intuitions, but yes, we have to, because we don't have, at certain points, we don't have any other choice. That any formula is fake here. It's just a cover for your intuition. So when you're balancing different principles, you've got no choice, just except to go with what seems fairest or what seems right. Okay, so anyone left in the question queue, or have we got to the end?
No,
there?
I think that's it. You do a Zoom round of applause, where you just kind of put your hands up as they're clapping.
Okay, that's what you do, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. I should make a quick announcement. So we are going to have our online AGM soon. If you want to run for a position, please send an email to phil@mail with the name of the position and a little manifesto, or like something you want people to see when they're voting online. The positions up for grabs are president, vice president, conference convener, Aporia editor, and external speakers coordinator. Please do get involved and make sure to vote when we put the candidates up. And we'll be having 2 more events the rest of the year. Next week we'll have Professor Herman Kaplan giving a talk. I'll put up a Facebook event for that soon. And then afterwards we'll have Professor Mona Simeon. So I'll see you guys in the next coming weeks, and stay tuned for the AGM. We really, really need turnout for voting because of the circumstances. So yeah, I'll see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take it easy, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you thanks again, Professor Wolff.
And thank you for coming along or turning up. Thanks very much. Okay, goodbye.
All right, Adam, you